Hi everyone, my name is Aaron J. Miller, co-host of Avatar State of Mind. Before you begin listening to episode 1 of our 31 episode deep dive into Avatar The Last Airbender and its accompanying material, I wanted to welcome new and longtime listeners. This podcast series was originally recorded while Sam DeCosta and I were students at Emerson College. It has been nearly 4 years since Sam and I recorded the final episode of this podcast. So, we decided to re-upload each episode to YouTube to serve as a time capsule of this project, and also to share what many have deemed as one of the most in-depth podcasts on Avatar The Last Airbender available online. It is important for me to note that all references to time and future episodes no longer make any sense whatsoever. All 31 episodes are available now. Please like the episode if you enjoy it. Enjoy the show. This is Avatar State of Mind.
Spoiler alert. If you have not watched Avatar The Last Airbender in its entirety, do not listen to the show today. This episode will include spoilers and dialogue about The Last Airbender, as well as The Legend of Korra and the extension of the Avatar universe. Welcome to Avatar State of Mind, a podcast exclusively dedicated to the universe of Avatar The Last Airbender. From The Last Airbender to Legend of Korra and the comic books in between, this is your number one stop for Avatar content. I'm your host, Sam DeCosta, and I am joined by my friend Aaron Miller to spend the next 30 minutes with you talking about Zuko's honor, underground libraries, the Air Nomad civilization, and so much more. So sit back, grab a cup of tea from the Jasmine Dragon, and enjoy the show. This is Avatar State of Mind. Hey Aaron, thanks for joining me on this special project that we decided to do.
Absolutely.
Avatar State of Mind, a new podcast just about Avatar. I know that you want to do this for a long time, and I want to do this myself. So thank you so much for hopping along with this project. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now, Avatar, it's a show that aired 15 years ago, and it's a universe that's been developing every year since. And even though Avatar ended 12 years ago, the demand for Avatar content has never been stronger than it is right now. Even though it's a kid's show, it has that appeal that you just can't describe. It's just unbelievable television.
No, I couldn't agree more. To be honest, especially with Netflix coming out with releasing Avatar recently, it has exploded. I believe Avatar was rated number 1 on Netflix, most watched for 7 weeks in a row. So the need for content about Avatar right now is so needed, and I feel like this podcast is really going to deliver on that.
And Legend of Korra came out on Netflix just a few weeks ago, and you also have the novels and the graphic novels about what happens in between Last Airbender and Korra and beyond and before. There's so much to unpack, and I think this podcast would be a great way to interact with more fans of Avatar and for us to just talk about the show that we love. And first of all, this may come up in the podcast down the road. We want to set the record straight right now. We don't talk about the movie. The movie is a disgrace against the show. It does not adequately fit into the Avatar universe, so you will never hear us talk about the movie.
What movie?
Exactly. That'd be set very clearly right now. Also, the people who don't watch Avatar, or never did, claim it's a kid's show. It was a Nickelodeon show. It does have kid themes to it. It's not a very mature show, but I would disagree because there's so much in Avatar that makes it a show that ages so well for adults. And like you and I watched it when we were kids, and now as adults, it's aged brilliantly.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember rushing home from a friend's birthday party to make sure I watched the final on the East Coast channels before it got put to the West Coast. Back when Nickelodeon was East and Pacific, it was channel 299 on DirecTV. I remember it so well. I was 8 years old. I remember rushing home, and I just watched that finale with my 9-year-old sister about a month ago now, and the surprise she had in her eyes and the excitement she had to watch that matched my excitement 12 years ago. So,
and the Avatar universe really doesn't get the appreciation or the love that maybe a universe like Harry Potter or the Hunger Games does, because the Avatar universe is unlike anything I've ever seen in a TV series, let alone like a Nickelodeon cartoon. there's the four nations, and they each have their own culture and lifestyle and their own beautiful cities, like the Northern Water Tribe and the walls of Ba Sing Se and the high-rise temples in the Air Nation, and also the spirit animals, the bending elements. There's no stone unturned in terms of detail and devotion that was poured into this show and this franchise.
I could not agree more.
So I think it would be appropriate to kickstart this podcast, talk about our top 5 favorite Avatar episodes for each of us. Although, for the sake of convenience, we're going to leave out the final 2 chapters of Sozin's Comment, because those are revered as probably the 2 best episodes in the Avatar universe, and it would be easy to say Into the Inferno and Avatar Aang as our favorites, but we're going to try and stay away from those 2 parts and talk about the rest of the show to make it a little more interesting. 3 books, about 61 episodes. There are so many that we can choose from, and all the episodes have a different way of telling the story, and we want to just break down what our favorites are. So, Aaron, do you want to start with your 2 of your favorite episodes of all time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a general theme. When I was looking to pick my top 5, my theme of favorite episodes revolves around establishing the universe episodes, and you'll see through Sam's choices we differ in that, because I'm such a big fan of the extended universe. I've read both the novels, read all the comics, and my favorite thing is everything beyond Avatar The Last Airbender. So starting chronologically, my favorite episode would be Avatar Day. That's episode, I believe, in book 1. This follows the episode. It doesn't follow, but it comes after when Aang and the gang they visit the Kyoshi Island, and they finally establish Kyoshi as an avatar before Aang. And my favorite thing about Avatar Day, to be honest, is when Aang is just thrown in prison for something Kyoshi did. And I think that really set in stone that an avatar's past life plays such a big impact in that current avatar's life, so much more than really any other character in any other series or universe I can think of. Because obviously, like, there's dynasties and bloodlines in real life and in other creations of fantasy, but this really, like, broadens upon that.
That's so interesting to me, because Avatar Day doesn't really live as one of the best episodes in the series, and in my opinion, it's rather inconsequential to the rest of the storyline. So I think it's fascinating that that's one of your top 5. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And my favorite part about that episode is when Aang sends Sokka. Well, Sokka actually has the idea, and he jokes about it the entire episode, about like him having this great idea when in reality Katara had the idea of going back to Kyoshi Island and getting the relics from Kyoshi, like when she lived, like her fans and her dress and her headpiece. And this also establishes in the show how significant relics are to past avatars. I mean, in previous episodes and future episodes, we learn that an avatar finds out that he or she is the avatar because of their connection to previous avatars' belongings.
And the toys that they select when they're kids.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, the toys they select. And the way that Aang, as soon as he touches Kyoshi's fans and everything, he just immediately goes into the avatar state, and you see Kyoshi presented, and Kyoshi tells her story about separating the islands and creating Kyoshi Island. And this episode really establishes Kyoshi herself as a previous avatar of being ruthless and just killing people to get her point across and accomplish what she needed. So obviously, like, this doesn't fall so much into the Avatar Last Airbender universe, but it definitely expands the horizons. And in very early on in the season, I believe this is
book 2.
This is book 2 or
right,
book 1?
It was actually right before Toph was introduced. It was in book 2.
Yeah, I mean, even before Aang started learning earthbending, we learn about the earthbending avatar before him.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just a fantastic episode. And so my second episode, if you want to keep going chronologically, would be The Guru. And Netflix combines this episode with The Crossroads of Destiny. But I like The Guru so much more. This is also extended, and there are going to be no spoilers about the Kyoshi novels, but I like the Guru episode so much because it is believed that a character established in the Kyoshi novels is actually Guru Patik, who is the guru who teaches Aang how to connect into the Avatar state. So if we have any listeners who haven't read the novels, I highly recommend it. Sam hasn't yet, but I'm going to make sure he does. So future episodes, we can talk about these novels. But the character that they established through Guru Patik is just fantastic. And the entire show, we believe that Aang is the last Airbender, and it's confirmed that he is. But the connection that the Guru has to the Air Nation and everything about the Avatar, teaching Aang, he just comes out of nowhere. I just find that so interesting, because never before was there just this random character who came in and taught Aang something. It's a coincidence that he was there and that Appa got lost, and that's how he found the connection through the Guru. But that episode is just fantastic, and it also leads into the Crossroads of Destiny, which is not my top 5 episode, but Netflix puts this with one of my top 5, when Azula kills Aang, which is just crazy. And then, of course, Katara brings it back to life. So everything in this episode establishes Book 3, which completely changes everything. But yeah, that's just one of my top 5.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk about some of my top 5. I'm going to start with Book 1, The Blue Spirit. This episode, it really establishes the partnership of Zuko and Aang, and for the first time we really envision the two as a tag team, because Book 1 Zuko is the least likable Zuko. He's the bald guy with the ponytail who's just chasing Aang to redeem himself, get back his honor. And then we see Zuko, well, we don't know this until the end of the episode obviously, but we see Zuko rescue Aang, and we see them take on all of Commander Zhao and his entire force of officers and soldiers at a Fire Nation prison, break out. And also, Zuko didn't even use any firebending in this episode when he broke out Aang. It was just, we saw how skilled of a swordsman that Zuko really is, and that really stands the test of time with the rest of the series, seeing how great Zuko is as a swordsman. And also, I'm a sucker for the tactics and the military strategy that we see from Zhao the whole show. And we see Zhao immediately gets promoted to admiral, and then his first order of business is hiring the archers so they can go and get Aang and capture him, and then we get to see what unfolds when Aang escapes with Zuko. And it sets the stage for what turns out to be, what I think the whole series turns out to be, is just a collision course of the journeys of Aang and Zuko when they eventually intersect and realize that they're meant to be working together and not as enemies, and that they ultimately take down the Fire Lord together.
Yeah, and this episode, like Sam was saying, this establishes the friendship that we see in The Promise, the comics that immediately follows the Sozin's Comet, where Aang and Zuko work together to unify the Fire Nation colonies and actually return the land to the Earth Kingdom. So, the friendship that's established, even though it's not so much a friendship because you do see Zuko shoot fire at Aang right when he wakes up, just the beginning of a friendship, I just think is fantastic. And this episode definitely is in my top 5 of one of the episodes that made me laugh the most, just because of Katara and Sokka.
The frogs. They had to suck on at the end of the episode to get, so moving on, another episode that I loved in this series, The Blind Bandit. Book 2, I think chapter 6. And it's obvious why I'm choosing this, is because we finally see Toph, Aang's earthbending mentor and teacher, and we get to introduce to Toph, first of all, just the fight and the sequence that we see Toph single-handedly take down all of the best earthbenders in the world in the pro-bending arena in front of her dad, who thinks she's some helpless blind girl, and then she destroys all of the earthbenders. I think it's one of the best fights in the series, unquestionably. And also, in this episode, we do see a side of Toph that we don't see a lot. And we forget how vulnerable Toph was initially in the beginning of the show. But she's not just a hard-nosed little girl with an aggressive personality. She has feelings, and she feels like she's being held back from the rest of the world. There's a line at the end of the episode when Toph is convincing her family to let her go and have some freedom. She says, "I'm 12 years old, and I've never had a real friend." And that is quietly one of the best lines of the show. And we forget about that because Toph really asserts her personality when she's let free. But we see a side of Toph that we don't really see the rest of the show, and then ultimately we see Toph join Team Avatar.
Yeah, it's one of my, even though it's not in my top 5, I'm gonna say this a lot, but it is one of my favorite episodes. I just love Avatar so much, and a big part of that specific episode is establishing. I'm not sure of the names of the bounty hunters, of the people that Toph's dad sent after her.
That's right. There's another part of that because it sets another like mild arc to the show, hunting for Toph to bring her back.
Yeah, the entire time in between the episode where they're sent off and when they actually do capture her before she learns metal bending, it's in the back of my head like, where are these people? They're just gonna pop out of anywhere and just capture Toph and maybe even capture Aang. So it's definitely something interesting to add. Yeah. So moving on from there, my third favorite episode has to be the Avatar and the Fire Lord. I think
it's a good one.
Yeah, it goes away from the storyline. Honestly, a lot of people thought it to be a filler episode when it was put in, just like the Tales of Ba Sing Se and other things like that. But I think the Avatar and the Fire Lord, it's not even in my top 5. I think it's tied for my favorite episode, just because the storytelling of it is absolutely fantastic. The episode itself just shows never before in Avatar did we see a time in the universe where there's peace in the world.
The Fire Nation was at peace.
Yeah, the Fire Nation was at peace, and that had never ever been shown in the show before. Like, the Fire Nation was just always attacking people and doing these huge conquests, killing the Air Nation. So, like, them being at peace, and then all of a sudden seeing Fire Lord Sozin's hunger for power and Roku's failure, like, that really showed that an Avatar isn't perfect. Because if an Avatar was perfect, Roku wouldn't have allowed the war to happen. And at the end of that specific episode, this is I think this was one of the biggest shock values of the entire show, was finding out that Zuko is the great-grandson of Sozin, which we knew, but he's also the great-grandson of Roku, which gives Zuko's mother much more credibility than before, because obviously we know that Zuko's mother was banished, and the comics even follow when Zuko finds his mother. But this doesn't just show like this random woman in the show who's sent off. It says that like there's actually lineage to everything. So it just makes the search for her so much more interesting.
Not to mention that the episode actually humanizes the Fire Nation, seeing the Fire Lord as an innocent human being, and may have played a part in Aang's decision when he was in a conflict not to kill the Fire Lord. Mm-hmm. So that's it's not even just a filler episode. That's a huge episode in the plot of the show, and ultimately leads Zuko to his decision to finally join Aang.
Yeah, and just one more thing about that episode in particular. When Roku was dying and he was on the volcano about to die, I can't remember his dragon's name, but his dragon just circled around him and basically died with him. Even though Roku said, like, get out of here. I believe his name was Fang, right? The dragon. And the dragon died with Roku, showing that the connection that an avatar has with its spirit animal is much more than just life. It lives on through the spirit world and everything else after.
A very wholesome end to that really catastrophic ending for Roku in his life. My next favorite episode, I'm going to say The Chase. This is book 2, I believe chapter 8. This is right after Zuko alone. It's when Toph is joined Team Avatar already. And one thing this episode does, there's a lot going on in this one, but it shows the issues that Team Avatar has in introducing a new team member. Toph is now in the fold, and they don't all get along initially. You have Katara getting so upset that Toph can't help set up camp, that she's not doing her part. You have Sokka even getting made fun of by Toph because he can't bend, so what good is he? You also have Toph she also scapegoats Appa for leaving a trail of fur, which helped Azula, Ty Lee, and May chase them during that whole episode. Not to mention they didn't get any sleep all night, so it made them even crankier and set them like at each other's throats. Also, we finally establish Azula and her gang as a true force in this show. They're not just like a recurring villain. They are actually here to stay, and they're out to get Aang and kill them.
Yeah, and that Azula in that episode terrified me as a kid. Like, oh my god.
It's so scary. But also at the end, seeing Team Avatar with Toph, with Zuko and Iroh, all facing and cornering Azula, it sets the stage for what happens in book 3, obviously. But just seeing them all together in line like that's the first time even Team Avatar is with Zuko or Iroh after the North Pole invasion. Oh, wow. So this is the first time they see Zuko and Iroh since the invasion. And also at the end when Azula strikes Iroh with lightning and Zuko's like on the ground like thinking Iroh's dead potentially, panicking and just in such agony, that's the first glimpse we see of Katara having sympathy towards Zuko. Like offering to heal Iroh, and Zuko, just filled with rage and pain, just shoots fire at them to tell them to get away, and it doesn't end appropriately. It doesn't give the fulfilling ending, but it just, there's so much happening in this episode, so much that it sets the stage for, and ultimately they fall asleep at the end.
Yeah, and another part of that is even when Toph goes off and sees Iroh. Like, I thought that was so interesting because I believe in, everybody knew at that point how big of a character Iroh was, and he was this uncle who's giving advice to everybody, but he's talking to Toph, like this new character to the gang, to like Aang and all the what's the term for it, the Avatar gang, I can't think of it.
Team Avatar.
Team Avatar, there you go. And this brand new member to Team Avatar is talking to Iroh because she has no idea who he is, she can't see. But just that conversation itself really cemented Iroh as like a top character in my mind.
For sure.
Yeah. So my fourth favorite episode here has to be the Firebending Masters. That's the episode when Zuko is trying to teach Aang firebending, but Zuko he can't do it. He can't firebend at all, and I believe Aang could firebend better than Zuko at that point, because Zuko, he completely lost how to do it. Because the thing is about firebending, it's so rooted in your emotion and how you're feeling in that exact moment and over time. And Zuko learned firebending being angry and wanting to recapture his honor. And as soon as he stopped being angry and stopped searching for his honor, he just lost that. So then him and Aang had to go and find the original firebending masters, which ended up being the dragons. And up until this point, we knew the three other elements, how they were taught to people. Like the moon taught the waterbenders, badger moles taught the earthbenders, the bison taught the air nomads, but we didn't know how the firebenders learned. And then we see these two dragons come out of the mountains. I just thought that was breathtaking, the way they came out like that, and the dragon dance and everything. This also furthers me liking Iroh so much, because everybody thought Iroh killed the last dragon, but he didn't, because there were obviously two left. But the dragon dance in this show, when I first saw it, I thought it was kind of weird because the way that they're dancing with the dragons. But after watching The Legend of Korra and seeing Wan learning firebending and advancing it through the dragons, and then having that connect back to The Last Airbender, I thought that was just masterful storytelling right there.
And back to the Avatar and the Fire Lord, it gives us a positive side of firebending, because the whole show, the Fire Nation is out to kill the world and destroy all civilization as we know it, but it also establishes fire as an element that's not just sheer destruction. It's an element of life and beauty, and the dragons really show that. And I agree, it's a great episode in that series for sure.
Yeah.
So, probably my second favorite episode in the whole show has got to be Book 2, Chapter 10, The Library. The library doesn't have Zuko or Iroh, which doesn't help, but this episode, it kickstarts probably the most important arc in the series. They go to the library in the desert, they find this big owl, Wan Shi Tong, and they're looking for intelligence that can help this team win the war, because Book 1 was all about going to the North Pole, finding a master for Katara and Aang. Book 2, Aang had already finally gotten out of his funk and started earthbending, but there wasn't a set arc for that season until they go to the library and they discover that there's going to be a solar eclipse in just a few months before Sozin's Comet. So there's a window of opportunity for Team Avatar to strike the Fire Nation with the element of surprise. And then while they discover that, Wan Shi Tong is upset because more humans are taking advantage of his knowledge to go kill other humans. And while they try to escape from the sinking library, Tuff's trying to hold the library intact while Appa gets stolen by sandbenders. So you kickstart this eclipse arc with the plan to go to Ba Sing Se, tell the Earth King, get reinforcements, but Appa's gone, and you have them stranded in the desert, and they don't even find Appa until after Lake Laogai. So you're without Appa for so long, and you have to get to Ba Sing Se, and it's a much more challenging road over there than it would have been with Appa. And it also gives them a plan that really stays that way for the rest of that season and half of Book 3, for when they finally, where they're building up to this invasion of the Fire Nation.
Yeah, and even building onto that, that episode was it changed everything. Everything you described, I literally couldn't take my eyes off the screen when I watched that for the first time. Like, just so much happened because I feel like the episodes leading up to that were kind of on the drier side. Like, there wasn't much happening. They're very, very slow, and then all of a sudden, boom, off to the races. Like, everything completely changes. So.
This episode, in my opinion, sets Avatar into high gear.
Yeah,
because it was good, but this is when Avatar became great.
I absolutely agree. And talking about when Avatar got really great, my final episode, top 5, would be Sozin's Comet: The Old Masters. This is part 2, I believe.
This is part 2.
Yeah, part 2 of Sozin's Comet. And I'm saying this one particularly because Sozin's Comet, I think the entire series finale actually was fantastically done. But just to pick one part of it, I have to talk about the Old Masters when Aang connects with his past lives. Up until this point, we knew about Roku and a little bit about Kyoshi, talking all the way back to Avatar Day and all those episodes, and Roku just because he was the Avatar before Aang. But we learned about Kuruk and Yang Chen, and we never knew anything about those avatars. And when Aang was going into the Avatar state, or he was meditating to see these people, I was like, who is this guy? Who are these people? I thought it was insane. And then learning about Yang Chen, because up until that point, we didn't know a whole lot about it. The Avatar. So when I saw another airbending Avatar, I was completely blown away. I thought that was very, very well done. And each of the Avatar stories based around doing the right thing and telling Aang that he has to do whatever he can to save the world. And there's all these memes going around saying that Kyoshi's like, just kill him. Like, Kyoshi, she kills when she needs to, and that's very often. But my favorite thing about this episode, other than Aang talking to the avatars, was the reconnection with the White Lotus and Zuko getting Iroh's forgiveness. Like, that episode, I think it made me cry the first time I saw it. I was 8 years old.
It's so emotional. Even watching now as a 19-year-old kid, it's devastating to watch.
Yeah.
Or not devastating, like, just you even though I know what happens and you know what happens, it's like, what's gonna happen?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so stressful.
and just if I can go back to talking about when Aang was meditating, when Kuruk comes out and he says, "I lived in peace" and all this stuff. There's a very big plot hole when Kuruk says that, and it's discussed in the Kyoshi novel. So we're going to talk about that in a future episode. Once Sam gets read up, or I'm going to convince him I can just talk to him about it. But there's a bit of a plot hole when Kuruk says that he didn't really do anything in his lifetime. So
okay. Well, for my favorite episode of all time in the Avatar Last Airbender show, I'm going to go with The Waterbending Master. Book 1, Episode 18. This is when the gang finally gets to the North Pole. It's the story arc of the whole first book, that they need to get to the North Pole to get Aang a waterbending master, and they finally arrive there. So it's like the quest has finally been achieved, and now it's a matter of just learning waterbending. But aside from that, you have Admiral Zhao. He's setting out his plan to destroy the Water Tribe once and for all. And along with that, he tries to assassinate Prince Zuko, which ultimately fails and backfires in his face. We see an attempted assassination. We actually see it happen in front of us. The pirates getting the blasting jelly and Zuko on the ship, realizing that the pirates have ambushed his ship. He might die. He realizes that might be it for him. And Iroh, in his face of anguish, looking at the ship, engulfed into flames, thinking that he lost his son already. Maybe he lost Zuko too, and that's a really heartbreaking moment. But back to Team Avatar, you also have the ingrained, dated traditions of a monarchy, having a princess turning 16 years old now of marrying age, and now she's looking for suitors, and Sokka tries to go out with her, but she's already engaged to somebody else. And then the ingrained sexism of the Water Tribe, Pakku refusing to teach Katara because she's a woman, just because of that, and that tradition. This is something that doesn't make this a kid show. The assassination attempt, obviously, but also the ingrained sexism that Katara, just because she's a woman, she can't learn waterbending. Although it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise for Katara, because she learns how to heal, and her healing abilities are so pivotal to this show. it's what saved Aang's life when he got shot by Azula. So Katara learning to heal as a byproduct of Paku not teaching her. Just, there's so many moving parts to this episode, and this might not be everyone's favorite episode, but the fact that you have the sexism and just Zhao's setting out on his plan to finally defeat the Water Tribe and cement his name into history, and then Aang learning waterbending, and just the beautiful Northern Water Tribe, probably the most beautiful setting in Avatar, at least that first show, because just the frozen tundra and the urban setting, and it's nothing like the South Pole that we saw at the beginning of the series.
No, and talking about the South Pole, could you imagine if Sokka and Yue married each other? Like, that would be the great like, that would bring everything together, you know? Because, like, the Northern and Southern Water Tribes, they're technically together, but they're just so much different. They're on opposite sides of the world. Could you imagine if they married?
And we see a lot of that in Korra, how the Northern and Southern Water Tribe have their differences, and even in Avatar, Sokka being referred to as a Southern peasant, and being Katara is the only waterbender left from the Southern tribe, and you have this vast society in the North Pole. I love it. I love just the Water Tribe is pretty small. What do you say? There's only the Southern Water Tribe, which is like 10 people, and then you have this great city in the North Pole.
Yeah, I love that episode a lot, just because it establishes and builds upon the politics of the entire universe. Because that's another thing that makes this so much more than just like a kid's cartoon on Nickelodeon. The politics surrounding everything, because honestly, I think it's such a dynamic show because of that.
Well, those are our favorite episodes in the series, and I have to admit, like, just talking about them gets me going again, and I just want to watch the show again. It's truly a great show, and I'm really excited for this podcast because there's really a clamoring for Avatar content right now, especially with all the series out. And Avatar, the great thing about it is that no matter how much they give us, we have The Last Airbender, Korra, the graphic novels, and the Kyoshi novels. They're leaving us wanting more all the time.
Yeah.
Next time we come back with you, we're going to talk about Avatar trivia. We're going to quiz each other on our Avatar knowledge and see who knows more about the Avatar universe. And while we play, you can play along with us and see how much you know your Avatar universe as well.
I'm excited for this because I plan to blow Sam out of the water.
Well, I'm coming prepared, and I plan on challenging you as well. Well, that is all the time we have for today's show. We'll be back every Saturday with a new show. Subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you stream the show. Follow us on Instagram at Avatar State of Mind, and let us know what you want to hear us talk about on the next show. As much as this is our show, this is for the listeners. Let us know where you want us to take this show and what you'd like us to talk about next. We're in this together. For Aaron Miller, my name is Sam DeCoste, and thank you once again for joining us today on Avatar State of Mind.
Mm-hmm.